overwhelmed because they don't realize what they're doing, and that's what's becoming more and more evident. A lot of patients are not being followed correctly by that physician. And in the past, nobody gave a shit.
Good morning, everyone. Let's call the meeting to order. Welcome to the 905th meeting of the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy. At this time, I'd like for our students to stand up and introduce ourselves, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm Jessica, I'm from Wingate. Heather Johnson, I'm from Campbell University. My name's Maria Buckner, I'm here at the Eshelman School of Pharmacy at UNC, and happy to be here.
My name's Kenny Kang, I also am from UNC.
Joanna Benson from Campbell, Carrie Dixon from Campbell.
Thank you so much for being here and welcome. This time, I'd like to read the ethics statement. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid both conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict of interest. Does any board member have any known conflicts of interest or appearance of conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict or appearance of conflict and refrain from any participation in the particular matter involved. Hearing none. Move to the next item, consideration of the minutes of the June 16th minutes meeting, as well as the minutes of the June 24th meeting.
I move that both be approved as presented, Mr. President.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Very good.
Mr. President, it is certainly no surprise to the members of the board that I am pleased to welcome on our behalf Andy Bowman, Doctor of Pharmacy on the faculty of the Campbell University School of Pharmacy, who was the elected representative from the Southeast region, or the Southeast District, I should say, in a runoff election. And Andy, I think Andy is well known to everybody except Robert. Robert's probably never met Andy until today. But Andy's well known to the board. He's well known for his tremendous work for NCAT, for his tremendous work at Campbell University, for his tremendous work on the North Carolina Pharmacist Recovery Network Board of Directors, and also for some of you know that Andy coordinates mutuals. I'm sure Jenna appreciates that, mutual CE. So Andy is truly a man of service to the profession who has worn just about every conceivable hat of service that one could wear. And I am pleased to welcome him. He, as you know, will have an apprenticeship period here, for lack of a better word, for the next year, and will be commissioned by the governor. Hopefully their office will be quick about that. Sometimes it's a little dicey at the end. To be appointed for a 5-year term, but Andy, certainly I and the staff know and love you very much and welcome you to the board. I know the members do as well, but welcome to the board members, and anything you'd like to say, get it started here, Andy. Let's go right ahead.
Dr. Bowman, please stand so that we can all recognize you.
I'm honored. I look forward to serving. I hope to do as good a job in the Southeast District seat as has been done by Joey, and to represent you guys well as a member of the board in May. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy, don't get out here today. I'll chat with you. A couple things I can give you. Mr. President, next item on the agenda, we have a consideration of a reinstatement request and a disciplinary hearing for technician Sherry Thomas. Mr. Sterrett, who I think most of you recognize from Brooks Pierce, will be handling this matter on behalf of board staff, and so I turn it over to you, Brian.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Thomas is here. If you'd like to come on up, Ms. Thomas. And while she's doing that, please have a seat over there. I'll distribute the notice of hearing.
Here, I'll hand that up, Brian.
Okay, great.
Sorry, I'm destroying.
And so for the benefit of getting the board acclimated to the nature of the matter, I will summarize the notice of hearing, which was served on Ms. Thomas on June the 2nd. The relevant facts that bring us here pursuant to the notice of hearing are that between June 3rd of 2008 and February 15th of 2011, Ms. Thomas was the holder of registration number 23009, and at all times relevant here too was employed as a pharmacy technician at the Durham Regional Hospital Pharmacy in Durham, and began her employment there on or about April 12th of 2010. During 2010, it is alleged that Ms. Thomas began diverting tramadol and cyclobenzaprine from the pharmacy. Those diversions came to the attention of the pharmacy staff when they discovered that tramadol 50 milligram tablets were missing from the pharmacy. Pharmacy reports revealed that Ms. Thomas was consistently involved in the transactions causing tramadol 50 milligram discrepancies, and that she had been accessing the bin containing the tramadol without cause. Pharmacy records further revealed that over 1,000 dosage units of tramadol 50 milligram were missing from the pharmacy between April 1st of 2010 and December 29th of 2010. And upon information belief, the losses of those 1,000 dosage units are attributable to Ms. Thomas. Pharmacy staff ran additional record reports that revealed losses of at least 170 dosage units of cyclobenzaprine 10 milligram attributable to transactions initiated by Ms. Thomas. Upon information and belief, Ms. Thomas diverted at least 170 dosage units of cyclobenzaprine. As a result of the pharmacy terminated Ms. Thomas's employment on January 5th, 2011. When initially questioned by the pharmacy, Ms. Thomas denied diverting any medications, though subsequently admitted to board staff, and I believe to pharmacy staff as well, that she diverted both tramadol and cyclobenzaprine. Ms. Thomas voluntarily surrendered her registration to the board on February 15th, 2011. On or about April 21st of 2011, the board staff received a request from Ms. Thomas seeking reinstatement of her previously surrendered registration. And then on or about July 12th of that same year, 2011, Ms. Thomas withdrew her request for reinstatement. Then again in April of this year, April 27th, board staff received a request from Ms. Thomas seeking reinstatement of her previous surrendered registration. And then as the notice goes on to indicate, the facts that I've just read to you demonstrate violations of various statutes that I will not read in detail, but are set forth in the notice before you. The board staff is here to ask for discipline. Ms. Thomas is here to ask for reinstatement. And so for the benefit of Ms. Thomas, what I'll do now is just briefly describe what we'll do this morning. Ms. Thomas, you are welcome to present any evidence you would like to the board in support of your request for reinstatement. You may present your own testimony. You may present documents. You may present you may question any witnesses you'd like to. If I call witnesses, you may ask any questions of them. So in general, the order that we will go in is, since this is your request for reinstatement, you will go first, and you are welcome to, as I say, present anything you like, and then as I go, when you're done, let us know, and I will proceed from there, and you will be free to ask any questions of anyone that I may call. So please proceed.
Good morning, and first of all, I just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity for this hearing. And again, I want to apologize to Lynn. I apologize to the staff when it happened, and I want to apologize to the Board of Pharmacy. I have been a pharmacy technician since the age of 18. I'm 53 years old, and it's kind of hard to start over to find something else to do. Excuse me, I got caught up emotionally trying to help a family member that couldn't afford the medication. Family member ended up dying, and I knew it was wrong. I just asked for your forgiveness, and I want to be reinstated. Because this situation has affected every area of my life, from financially to health, family, and the embarrassment has just been horrible. And again, I ask for your forgiveness.
Ms. Thomas, I've got some questions for you.
We should swear her in.
Yeah, we should. If you'll come, thank you. Ms. Thomas, just to confirm, you're here pursuant to the notice of hearing that I just described and handed out, is that correct?
Yes.
And you received that notice of hearing?
Yes, I have.
In 2010, you were employed at Durham Regional Pharmacy, is that
Yes.
correct? And that, when did that employment start?
April.
How did you come to be employed at Durham?
I was working at Select Pharmacy, which is in the same hospital on the 6th floor,
Okay.
and I applied for the position at Durham Region.
When did your employment end there?
December. Yeah.
December 2010?
Yes, sir.
And what was the cause for the end of your employment?
As you stated, for the diversion of the drugs.
When did you, so am I correct in understanding that you don't deny that you diverted tramadol and
No, I
cyclobenzaprine?
don't, sir.
When did you first start diverting those medications from the pharmacy?
I don't know the exact date, I'm sorry.
Was it soon after you started, or was it near
The number that was taken. I'm sorry, I didn't keep up with the count.
I got 2 rounds of stuff. Ms. Thomas, I'm distributing, and you'll soon receive from Mr. Campbell documents that I believe you've seen before, but I'll wait until you have it in hand before I ask you about it. The first document you should have just received, Ms. One captioned Board's first interrogatories and requests for production of documents. Do you see that document in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. And as you flip through this, there are a series of questions, and then there are handwritten responses in this document. Do you see
Mhm.
those handwritten? Is
Yeah, I
that your
remember.
handwriting?
Yes, I did
Those are
this.
your responses to these
Yes,
questions?
sir.
And were those responses that you wrote here, were they true when you wrote them?
Yes,
Do they remain true?
yes.
Okay. Let me turn you to the other document you've been handed, which is the board's request for admission. A little bit shorter of a document, but sort of looks the same. Also handwritten answers throughout this document. Is that your handwriting in these?
Yes, sir.
The answers that you wrote when you wrote them?
Yes,
Do they remain true?
yes.
Okay. If you'll turn in the board's request for admission to page 2, number 2, that reads, admit that during your employment with the pharmacy you diverted in excess of 1,000 dosage units of tramadol. You see that?
Yes.
And you wrote, yes, I don't know the exact number?
Right.
Okay. So you admit that you
I
diverted.
could not afford prescription.
Did that family member have a prescription for either tramadol or cyclobenzaprine?
I don't know, sir.
Okay. All of the pills that you diverted over the course of your employment, did you give every single pill you diverted to that family member?
Yes,
Did that family member consume every single pill that you diverted?
I would think so, yeah. I
You
don't
don't
know.
know?
I wasn't there when the person actually took the medication.
And forgive me, I don't want to be insensitive, but I do need to ask a little bit about this. The individual you said was suffering some sort of health issue and was
Right.
dying, I believe you said.
Right,
Has that person since been deceased?
yes.
When did that person pass away?
It was during my employment when I was there at Durham Regional. I'm sorry, I didn't bring her obituary. It was in 2010 when she died.
So that person passed away while you were still, before you were terminated?
Right.
Okay. Did you continue to divert prescriptions even after the passing of this person?
No,
Would you identify for the board who that person is?
I'd rather not, please.
Okay, can you describe why you would rather not do that?
I mean, it was a person that nobody else in my family knew that I was actually taking this medication, and I just want to keep it non-disclosed if I could.
Okay. Do you have any knowledge as to if there were any pills that you gave to this person that remained untaken after her passing?
I don't know.
Okay. So, for all you know, there may be pills floating out there that you have no idea where they are.
I'm sure when a family cleaned out the house, I don't know what they did with the medication.
How did it come to pass during your employment that you were first made aware that the pharmacy suspected your diversion?
I remember the day I came to work and I was working in front of the pharmacy and there was a gentleman that came in, I answered the door, I let him in, and he proceeded to go to the back of the pharmacy, and Daryl, the assistant pharmacist, manager, right? He came and got me and said, we need to meet. And that's when
And can you say a little bit about what the nature of that conversation was?
they took me in the office and said that they noticed that I had been diverting medication. And of course, me being embarrassed and ashamed, I denied it. And they asked for my badge and for me to leave.
Did you subsequently admit to the pharmacy staff that you had been
Not
diverted?
then, I did not, sir.
When did you ultimately do that?
When I met with the investigator at the library.
And about when was that?
I don't know the date, I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you know what tramadol or cyclobenzaprine are designed to treat?
I know one is a muscle relaxant and the other one was used for pain.
Did you yourself ever take any of the tramadol or cyclobenzaprine?
No,
During your employment at the pharmacy, did you ever suffer the type of pain or other conditions that would be treatable by tramadol or cyclobenzaprine?
no,
Okay. Did you ever miss work due to any pain issues yourself?
no, I wasn't absent on my job.
Ever have any or express any pain-related ailments you were suffering while working at the pharmacy?
No. No, when I fell down one day and then convert to that. I had, somebody had wasted water in the floor and I was turning the corner. Of course, I slipped and fell in the water, but I wasn't, I mean, I didn't have to be out of work.
Have you ever consumed tramadol or cyclobenzaprine without a prescription?
No,
Okay. Have you ever undertaken, either as part of your seeking reinstatement here or otherwise, any sort of drug assessment?
no,
Okay. Have you ever been given any indication that it would be in your interest to do so as part of seeking reinstatement?
well, Mr. Campbell had mentioned it, and as I stated to him, I'm not on any drugs, so I didn't do it.
Okay. What happened to your license once you were terminated from employment with the pharmacy?
What do you mean, what happened? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Did you voluntarily surrender your license?
Yes, I did, sir.
Okay. Just for the record, I'm circulating Mr. Campbell's handing out now copies of a document I'll ask you about momentarily. Ms. Thomas, if you look at the bottom of this document, there's numbers that we lawyers like to call Bates numbers. There's a 211 there.
Mm-hmm. If
If you'll turn to the next page, 212, is that your signature there?
Yes, sir.
So this is your voluntarily surrender of your technician registration?
Yes.
Okay. As the notice of hearing indicates, you first sought reinstatement of your registration in 2011, is that correct?
Yes,
But you ultimately withdrew.
right.
Why did you withdraw that request?
Once again, I was embarrassed and just, it took me this long to forgive myself of what I did in order, and come to just confront it. And as I stated, this has affected every area of my life. I mean, I've been working, but it's just been, the jobs is not, I'm barely making it, sir.
Will you describe to the board, please, what have you been doing for employment since you were terminated from the pharmacy?
As I stated when I spoke to Mr. Campbell, he asked me the same thing, so what have you been doing for the last 4 years? I went back to school. At Durham Tech, I got went for BioWorks, biotechnology, got a certificate in that. I've been working in call centers. And right now I'm employed at LabCorp in Burlington as a customer service representative. But it's been just temporary jobs, nothing permanent, like what I'm used to as pharmacy.
Ms. Thomas, I don't believe I have any more questions for you.
And that's why I asked the questions, because
I have learned my lesson.
I know, based on a lot of years' experience, these things can present themselves at least opportune time, and
Not with me, sir.
you need to be able to withstand on that.
Right, I understand.
Okay.
Mr. President, were any criminal charges filed against you?
No, sir, the hospital did not.
Ms. Thomas, over what period of time approximately did this activity occur?
I started at Durham Regional, as I stated, in April 2010, and I stopped in December, so it was in that time span.
Was this you were obtaining these medications for, using them prior to your employment?
Yes. Well, I guess, the person said they did not have a prescription. I don't know, I don't think she had a prescription. She just,
How did you determine that her need was for these two medications?
it's been my experience being in pharmacy, people will flock to you and ask you, do you know this? Or, they ask you questions about the medication, or family members or want your knowledge of medication. And that's how it came up in a conversation.
So
And I
this-
felt sorry for the person, and I took it, my emotions, as I stated, my emotions got involved, and it was just wrong. It was just totally, totally wrong.
So this individual shared with you that she used these drugs and obtained relief, or
Right. I mean, she just was asking, I guess she had spoken with someone else. She was aware, she was familiar with the medication.
so to your knowledge, they were never prescribed for her by a physician at any time?
I think so, sir.
What was the nature of her condition?
I can't remember exactly what her diagnosis was. Over a period of time, she just had a lot of ailments. I want to say it had something to do with her heart and blood, breathing. I'm sorry, I don't know her. I don't remember her diagnosis. I just know she left us in a bind. I mean, she had 4 kids, which our family had to take over. It was just a horrible situation. I'm still taking care of her kids now. It's sad.
You are personally taking care of her
No,
children?
I mean, our family,
Yeah.
that side of the family.
Were you related to this individual?
Yes, sir. Cousin. I'm sorry, it was just horrible.
Well, what makes it so horrible?
It's horrible because I let myself get involved like that.
That you were facilitating the,
I think she was starting to go to the hospital then, and as it got worse, she was admitted in the hospital,
yeah.
in and out.
How long was this individual ill with whatever disease she had? Was it a chronic thing or more or less sudden
It
onset?
was well, I don't know how long she had been sick because she couldn't afford, like I said, she couldn't afford the medicine. When she did go to the hospital, it was too late, if that makes sense.
Any other questions from the?
I have one more follow-up question, I apologize. Ms. Thomas, I think when board counsel asked you earlier, when they were asking you questions, you said you didn't take any medication. Now you just said you
Oh,
took
well,
blood pressure medication.
as far as, that was after, I'm sorry, I should have stated. I thought he was asking me had I taken the tramadol or the Flexeril. But yes, I am
Maybe I
on,
misunderstood. I thought he asked you if you took any
no,
medication.
I'm on high blood pressure medication because of this situation.
Thank
Just a couple additional questions, board members. Ms. Thomas, where did you work prior to Durham Regional?
At Select Pharmacies, and it's inside the hospital.
Did you, at that time, did you divert any medications?
No, no.
When did you first learn of this?
Just the embarrassment of going through this. I
Sure.
couldn't share this with them.
I
They
understand.
knew I didn't have a job, but they don't know why.
I understand. I'm just thinking, you know, going forward, you might need that support system, and that's why I'm asking the questions.
I do.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Motion for closed session.
I actually have a
We still
couple,
have more.
couple
Sorry.
quick witnesses, Mr. President.
Okay, sorry.
Next witness would be Ms. Lynn Witt. You'll come right here and give your sworn.
Good morning.
Morning.
Will you just please introduce yourself and identify yourself to the board?
I'm Lynn Wood. I'm Director of Pharmacy at now Duke Regional Hospital. At the time of this incident, it was Durham Regional Hospital. And I've been there now for almost 27 years. So,
Ms. Witt, have you ever employed Sherry Thomas?
yes,
Can you just describe how she came to be in the employment of Durham Regional?
like she said, she was a pharmacy technician in our Select Hospital, which is on our 6th level. That is a hospital that subcontracts within our hospital. It's a rehabilitation center. And she came by the recommendation of one of our pharmacists, who was a PRN pharmacist for Select, and he highly recommended Ms. Thomas for employment. So she applied. She went through the interview process with HR and with my pharmacy technician supervisor. And we made the decision to hire her based on her recommendations.
And what caused you to, you terminated ultimately Ms. Thomas, is that correct?
Say that again?
You terminated Ms. Thomas's employment at some point? is
Yes,
that correct?
January 11th, 2011.
What caused you to make the decision to terminate her employment?
Diversion.
How did you first,
One of my pharmacy technicians, who is an excellent technician, happened to be working in the ED, and one of the nurses came up to her and said, "You may want to look at the tramadol, because for some reason we keep running out, and it keeps asking us to create a discrepancy for the tramadol." And so the pharmacy technician came to the technician supervisor. We then went to our Omnicell manager, ran reports just on the tramadol, and then we had evidence that Sherry Thomas. December 1st of December, at that time, tramadol was not a controlled substance. Flexeril, of course, is not a controlled substance. What I decided to do was turn on blind count in our Omnicell machines for the tramadol. I asked 2 of my Omnicell technicians who were very savvy with Omnicell to turn blind count on. Every time that Sherry Thomas would go to restock Omnicell machines on her scheduled dates that she was in that particular spot, I asked them to go up and blind count tramadol right behind her. And so we did that the month of December. And so if you look in the reports, my report to the board, that I could verify that she did divert 163 tramadol during the month of December based on the blind count review.
thank you, Ms. Witt. In fact, if you'll look at the document on the left side of the table there, it looks like this. It's got a Bates number as we, at the bottom, 260. If you turn
Yes.
to page 2 is 261.
Okay?
This is a drug disaster and loss report.
Yes.
If you'll turn to the next page, 262, indicates you submitted this report
Yes,
on January the 11th, 2011.
yes,
This is the, where you're reporting to the board the 163.
yes, from the blind count.
Thank you. Did you ultimately submit any additional reports or information to the board with regards to diversion of medication?
Yes, when I met with Crystal, the Board of Pharmacy investigator, she asked me to do an addendum to the report to look at all of the tramadol and Flexeril back from the beginning of her employment. And that will represent the over 1,000 doses of tramadol and around 173 doses of Flexeril. The exact count for the tramadol between April 1st through December 29th was 1,209 tramadol and 173 of Flexeril.
And Ms. Witt, yeah, I did. I've got one here. Ms. Witt, if you'll take this from me, I'm handing you another drug disaster and loss report. If you turn to the second page of this document, your name appears on June 9th, 2011. Is this the supplemental report you just mentioned that you filed with the board?
Yes.
And I believe you just testified that you ultimately discovered over 1,000 dosage units of tramadol were diverted. How did you describe how you determined that number?
Yes, we ran reports for tramadol house-wide, and we looked for trends where Sherry would either access the bin but not restock. So that would create what you call a null transaction. That means that she just accessed the bin, did not restock the bin or remove anything from the bin, but you know that they went in the bin. So we counted up the times that we had evidence that she accessed the tramadol bin between April and December, and that's the count.
Ms. Witt, Mr. Campbell is passing out, and you'll soon have in your hand a series of documents.
Thank you.
Beginning with, if you look
Yes, I have them.
sideways in the top right corner, document 33, a series of pharmacy discrepancy reports. If you'll just take a moment and flip through these. Are these the reports that you ran to determine the amount of tramadol diversion?
Yes.
So are these is the information contained in these reports what supports your conclusion that over 1,000 dosage units were diverted?
Yes.
Did you at some point confront Ms. Thomas about the suspicion of diversion?
Yes, as Ms. Thomas mentioned, I believe it was December 29th, where she was called back to the administrative office by an HR representative and Daryl Blackburn, my assistant director of pharmacy. I was out of town at the time, and they confronted her about the diversion, at which she claimed that she denied at the time. We placed administrative leave so that we could further consult with HR and review our documentation, again, with HR. We then called her back into the office on January 11th, in which I was present with HR representation. At that time, Ms. Thomas did verify that she did divert the medication for a sick family member. We chose at that time to terminate her employment with us on January 11th.
Did you ask Ms. Thomas at any time if she herself had taken any of the tramadol Flexeril?
Yes.
And what was her response to that?
No.
Are you aware of Ms. Thomas ever suffering any, let me rephrase, are you aware of Ms. Thomas ever missing work due to any pain-related issues she herself was having?
I do not have any documentation that any absences were related to pain. We did go back through our records.
Beyond documentation, do you have any knowledge of any instances where Ms. Thomas may have missed work due to pain-related issues?
I do recall a conversation with her. She was out in Main Pharmacy, and she looked like she didn't feel very well, and I just asked her, was she doing okay? And she did mention that her back was bothering her. She did mention that she slipped, which I would have submitted that if that had been in her record, which it was not. So it could have been around that time that event happened.
Do you recall when during the course of her employment that was beginning, and do you know the month?
I do not.
Okay. After you terminated Ms. Thomas's employment, did the diversion of medication cease at the pharmacy?
Yes.
Have you suffered any diversions to your knowledge at the pharmacy since she left your employment?
No.
Ms. Thomas, I have no more questions for Ms. Wood. If you'd like to ask her anything. Board members, any questions for Ms. Witt?
May I reflect for a moment?
Sure.
On Ms. Thomas? Please. So when we hired Ms. Thomas, as I said, she came highly recommended. I will say, for her, personally, my personal belief for her, she had a very high work ethic. She exhibited emotional intelligence, which is something that I needed for some of my younger employees. So she set a very good example, diversion aside, during her employment with me. So she was a really good pharmacy technician. She knew her job. All the staff really liked her. She got along with everybody really well. I'm very sorry for her for this incident, but I just wanted to tell you what type of employee that she was.
If this incident had not occurred, is it your belief that she would still be employed?
Yes.
Would she be eligible for rehire by your institution?
When we terminate, we're asked the question, is this person eligible for rehire? And HR checked no.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I've got about 5 minutes with the investigator and then I think they'll be done. Crystal? Will you please just identify yourself for the board?
Crystal Brashears, Associate Director of Investigations and Inspections.
Does your job, Ms. Brashears, involve investigating reports of diversion?
Yes,
Did you investigate a report of diversion at Durham Regional?
yes.
What instigated that investigation?
We received a loss report from Durham Regional indicating that they had had a diversion of trauma.
Did you prepare a report as a result of that investigation?
I did.
I believe you have in front of you a document that begins with a base number 204 at the bottom.
Mhm.
Is this a copy of the report that you prepared as a result of the investigation we just discussed?
Yes, it is.
Did you interview Ms. Thomas as part of your investigation?
I did.
And when did you perform that interview or those interviews?
I did an interview in February 2011 and another in June 2011.
Did you ask Ms. Thomas if she had been diverting medications from Durham Regional?
I did.
And what was the answer that you got?
She admitted to diverting the drugs from Durham Regional.
Why did you perform a second interview with Ms. Thomas?
Because we were trying to see if she would disclose the name of the person she diverted for.
And did she ever disclose the name?
No, she refused.
And did she explain why she did not want to disclose the name?
She wanted to keep their privacy.
I have no more questions for Ms. Brashears. Ms. Thomas, if you have any questions, you're certainly free to ask them of Ms. Brashears. Any questions from the board?
Ms. Brashears, is it important, do you believe, to this investigation that we know the name of the individual that was purportedly in need of this medication?
I mean, it wouldn't have furthered our investigation. We wouldn't investigate the individual because they weren't registered or licensed with the board.
Thank you.
Ms. Brashears, did you ever ask Ms. Thomas directly if she had consumed any of the diverted medications?
I did.
And what was the answer you got from that?
She said it was not for personal use, that she did not take any of the medication for herself.
No more questions for you? Any final questions from the board? At this point, board members, board counsel has nothing further, unless Ms. Thomas has any final comments she'd like to make.
I have a question, another question for Ms. Brashears. Did you hear any earlier testimony that you felt was inconsistent with your knowledge of this case?
No.
Thank you.
Question for you. We're called upon to, the request is that we reinstate this registration. It's certainly not a license. But also I heard it said something about to consider any disciplinary action on that registration. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I think as a practical matter, the discipline that we would be seeking would be a denial of the reinstatement because we're faced, the posture is a previous voluntary surrender.
Understand.
That's correct.
Thank you.
You have a question for?
Ms. Thomas, is that okay?
Please.
Okay. So if you started working in April and you were finished by December, when did you start the diversion? I mean, was it?
I don't know the dates. I'm sure it's in the
But just
packet.
generally, was it summertime? Was it right when you started? When did
No,
you
it
feel?
wasn't right when I started, ma'am. I'm sorry, I don't remember the date. I don't.
Okay.
It wasn't right when I started, though, no, ma'am.
Okay. And when you, did you personally give this person the Medicaid, the tramadol and the,
Yes, I did.
you handed it to, so were they in a labeled bottle or?
No, it was in the unit dose. It was in
I see.
the pack. The
Okay.
unit dose pack.
Uh-huh. And do you feel like you stepped out of your bounds as far as your training goes?
Oh, yes, ma'am, I did, yes.
And that it was potentially harmful for the person you obviously care so much about?
Right. I mean, I took matters in my own hand. Like I said, it was just, I got caught up emotionally, and it was wrong.
Thank you.
Did you have that feeling in your gut that you were doing wrong?
Yes. I did. I knew it was wrong. I was raised better than this. I know, it's just when, I've never done anything like this before. I just got, it was wrong.
I have another question for Ms. Witt. Do we need to get her to the microphone?
I think
Yeah,
that would
because
be.
it needs to be,
Yes, sir.
yeah, it needs to be reported clearly.
Yes, sir.
Did you hear anything earlier prior to your testimony that was inconsistent with your understanding and beliefs of this case?
No, sir.
I'd like to actually ask a follow-up with Ms. Witt. Ms. Witt, we talked briefly about these pharmacy discrepancy reports that you ran.
Yes.
Did you come to any conclusion about what the timeline was of the diversion as a result of reviewing these reports? In other words, when it might have begun?
So these reports began April 1st. So if we look at the dates on here, looks like on the very first page, June.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
If no other questions, I think now would be the appropriate time for a couple closing comments from both board staff, board counsel, and Ms. Thomas. Board members, I think the evidence is fairly undisputed in terms of the nature of the diversion, the scope of the diversion. In terms of what gives particular pause in this case, it is one where the motivation for the diversion remains somewhat opaque, in that we're told it's a family member who was suffering an unidentified condition, that we have testimony, there was knowledge that there was no prescription that that individual had for these medications. Not even sure that these medications necessarily were appropriate for whatever unidentified conditions that there were. And we also have an unidentified recipient, so it's not crystal clear where exactly all these diverted prescriptions landed. And if they're still out there, they may be floating around in the second degree or third degree recipient that we have no knowledge of. I think those are variables and factors that give particular concern to the judgment that underpins a lot of this, and that I think is critical to your determination about whether a reinstatement is appropriate. Not only, Ms. Thomas obviously has been very forthcoming about the diversion, but it's really the underpinning judgment issues surrounding that I think give particular pause to the considerations that the board has to make today.
Related to that, if I may, related to that too is Ms. Thomas has testified that she did not take any of the medications, and she did not divert them for personal use, but she's asking you to accept that, and that would be your choice. You can accept that based on her testimony if you find her testimony credible on that point, or not accept that testimony, but staff would ask you to consider that one of the requests that was made of Ms. Thomas, or questions of Ms. Thomas, was have you sought any evaluation for a personal substance abuse problem, and Ms. Thomas testified that she had not, because she was not using the drugs. And you will have to decide, is her assertion sufficient? Or with regard to your responsibility to protect the public, should there have been objective evidence that these medications were diverted for someone else, or were they also diverted for personal use? We just don't know, aside from Ms. Thomas's testimony, which again, it is your job to determine the credibility of that testimony.
We have one more question for Crystal Brashears, if we may. we out of order to do that? Well, you've summarized. And then we'll get to your, in your report, base mark, page 207, number 207. Your report indicates that the family member had been prescribed the medications.
That's what she had told me in my statement,
Okay.
or in her statement to me, sorry.
Did you ever see any evidence of a
I
prescription?
did not.
Okay. Or was it ever revealed who the prescriber was?
No.
Okay. Board members?
One question concerning the closing remarks.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that these meds might still be out there.
Yes, sir.
You really don't think that medication diverted in 2010 is still floating around out somewhere in society, do you?
I think the answer is that the only answer for the board is that we don't know the answer to that question.
And we don't have any idea that it is. So we just made a statement there for the sake of making a statement. Is that correct?
I think my goal, Mr. Haber, was to summarize the evidence before the board, that there's no
It's
evidence.
just that we don't know.
I understand that, but the evidence doesn't support that there's any medication out there floating around.
That's correct.
Correct.
I'm just asking.
Yes, sir.
I'm
That's
trying
correct.
to get it all squared away.
That's correct.
No, that's, yes, Dan, what he's saying is, we don't know. We don't have any idea where the medication is or where it went.
One follow-up. Crystal, in your conversations or whatever, interrogations with Thomas, did it ever come up that this medication that was diverted might have led to the untimely demise of this person that she prescribed the medicine for?
No,
But we don't know that, do we?
no, we don't.
One last one. I'm not sure the answer to this question. What, does anybody know the cost of Tramadol 50 milligram generic? Does anybody say 100 of those, any of our pharmacists in the room?
At the time, they were $2 a tablet
$2 a tablet.
for 50 milligram
Okay.
generic
Cost or patient charge?
cost for me to purchase.
Has any restitution been made? Have you been, has the hospital been reimbursed for the cost of the loss?
What did they say the cost was, the dollar amount?
$2 a piece at that time.
Tramadol in 2010 cost $2 a piece.
To their hospital system.
We have contracts.
How much so would it be for like your basic retail prescription, approximately?
I just want to make sure on the record that we don't sort of get into arguments about
irrelevant.
different pricing tiers, that it's not germane to the.
The reason I'm asking this question is.
No, I don't understand why you're asking a question. I just want to make sure Stan looks like he's thinking about different suppliers over
Yeah,
here.
I do. When I consider the cost of Tramadol today in 2010, what it costs, best my memory is, and then you throw in the tier situation, I don't know about $2 a piece. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
That's,
Does not matter.
Whether they were 2 cents a piece or $2 a piece.
That's what I said. It doesn't
certainly,
really
as the
matter,
fact
but-
finders, it's entirely up to the board to decide what
Yeah,
conclusion you
It,
reach.
do-
with
it doesn't really matter, but it's a curiosity.
But if Ms. Thomas was doing this to help this person financially, that she couldn't afford these meds, it, how appropriate is that? Just asking.
Make the motion, we move into closed session.
Wait, but 1 second. We still have closing
Okay.
comments from Ms. Thomas.
Once again, I just want to say thank you to Board of Pharmacy and apologize again, Lynn, for my actions. And I just ask that you guys please forgive me. And you will never have to worry with me ever doing anything like this again. As I stated, I'm 53 years old. I would like to retire in my 60s. And I want to do it doing my profession that I've done for the last 30 years. Thank you.
Would you restate your motion, please?
At the appropriate time, I'll make that motion.
Are you folks through?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from the board? Do you have a motion for closed session? All in favor?
Aye.
We'll be back shortly.
Ms. Thomas, just so you know, they're going into a closed session to deliberate the matter. If they
Motion to move into open session.
Motion made, please.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Did Ms. Thomas leave permanently, or is she just on?
No, she's right there.
Okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Thomas, we deliberated this at length, and obviously we consider this a very serious offense. I am sorry to tell you that we will not reinstate your license. And it was not a unanimous decision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, next item on the.
May we-
I'm sorry.
Just a second.
Okay.
May we take a 10-minute break?
Yes, sir. Sure.
Let's reconvene at 10:25.
I don't know, Robert, maybe I'm out of bounds. I really don't think our attorney should make those kind of comments.
Sit there in the corner, I get it.
I'll take you. Take plenty.
I get it. I get it. I get it. I just don't see it. It's way up in the corner. Careful, watch your head. I had to look a couple times, see it.
I was here, I was sitting in the overflow room. Oh, really? There was no seat. Today, you get a seat here, it's a problem. I thought you got more clout for that now. Well, if I not showed up at 8:55, I could.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Hello, Stan, welcome.
How are you? Good.
How are you doing, Robert? Andy did a good job. On that kid, that kid that jumped the gun. Brought down the camera on the kid, and when that kid jumped the gun without. I didn't know. I think she's laughing. I started 7 days and Andy got me. He thought it was aggressive. I'm sure he was doing exactly the same thing he was doing the day before and the week before. They just flipped him over in the system. And what it was, yeah. And then the guy from
I was like,
I really think that's the man. I think he's good. Oh, yeah. I mean, you could tell what he never know anything when it goes several countries. His answer was right close. I just, in this world. Database page just to get the, his correctness. I went down today to this lawsuit.
Item on the agenda is a request from Hani Ali Shah. Hani, did that pronounce all that correct?
Hi, Sally.
Hani, come on up. Now, and you have a seat there, Hani, wherever you like. Let me give the background. Mr. Shah, is it Mr. Shah or Mr. Ali Shah? Hani Sali. Mr. Sali. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be glib. I want to make sure I get it right. Make sure I get it right because it's insulting to not get it right. So Hani, how about if I just say Hani? Well, that's spare everybody my fumblings here. Hani has requested that this board consider waiving the requirement that as part of obtaining federal foreign graduate pharmacy equivalency, waiving the requirement that he pass the test of English as a foreign language. By way of background, the North Carolina Pharmacy Practice Act specifies eligibility requirements for licensure. Paragraph B of the relevant statute says that all applicants shall have received an undergraduate degree from a school of pharmacy approved by the board. Board Rule 1317 defines a graduate of an approved school or college of pharmacy as a person who has received an undergraduate professional degree in pharmacy from an approved school or college of pharmacy, or a person who has graduated from a foreign professional school of pharmacy and has successfully completed the Foreign Pharmacy Graduate Equivalency Exam offered by the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy and the test of English as a foreign language. By way of further background, the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy only issues a Foreign Pharmacy Graduate Examination Committee certification when the applicant has completed successfully both the FGPEE, that's the examination, and the test of English as a foreign language internet-based test. Hani has reported in his email that he has passed the exam and has also reported that despite numerous attempts, has not achieved a successful score on the test of English as a foreign language. And Hani explains some circumstances, which I'm just certainly turn it over to you, Hani, to explain your circumstances. But he is requesting a waiver. Essentially, it boils down to he's asking for a waiver of the requirement that he achieve foreign graduate pharmacy equivalency certification as a condition of eligibility for licensure. So with that, Hani, and Hani provided an email, and I did provide them with your email to me about this. And so, Hani, I will turn to you for your to talk about your request to the board.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Well, good morning, gentlemen, ladies. Thank you so much for your time and allow me for being here. I just want to give a brief history about myself. My name is Hani Sali, born and raised in the northern of Iraq. Graduated pharmacy school in 2006. Then after graduation, I worked as a pharmacist for about 4 to 5 months in a retail pharmacy in Iraq. Then after that, I became interpreter with the coalition force in a combat support hospital, providing language services to all nationals, because I do speak more than one language, and they allow me to work there as a linguist, translating all the medical terminology for the patients between Americans and other nationalities. And in 2009, I granted a green card, and I came to United States and applied for a pharmacy license exam, and I passed it. And I want to just mention that this pharmacy exam was in English, so I passed that exam in 2010. Since then, I'm trying to pass my TOEFL test of English as a foreign language, which is also required for license to be to be licensed with the board in all over the United States. So I tried many times, so 10 times. Last time I took it, that was July 11. Unfortunately, I passed 2 sections, and I did not pass the other 2. So I just want to tell you about also When I came here to the United States, I applied for a pharmacy technician, and I passed it also. That was also in English. And I worked 2 years with the Rite Aid as a pharmacy technician. Okay. Being a pharmacy technician, I received prescriptions, whether regardless by hand or electronically or like on phone call. Input all that prescription information in the system, and prepare the medications and hand it to a pharmacist, and the pharmacist will evaluate it and check it and hand it to customers. All that it's done, of course, with me and also other team of pharmacy technicians, and all that conducted in English. Besides that, all customers, they were all English speaker. So I have to talk with them, communicate with them. I will also assure that they've been well served, and all that also cannot served by in English. Unfortunately, my English is good, but it's not good enough to pass the TOEFL. And the TOEFL test, I don't know, I'm sure like you guys familiar with the TOEFL. The topic in TOEFL is not relevant to pharmacy whatsoever. There is science, but there is also art. I remember last time I took, that was talking about the opera in 15th century in Italy. And they are judging my pharmacy skill based on that. I do agree that most of the foreign graduates, when they come here, they have an issue with the language. It's a barrier. But it's in case like me, and I work here, and I've been living here for 6 years, and also I taught. I'm still in the Army, teaching Army personnel how to learn other language in English. So my request here today is to waive the TOEFL requirement for to pursue my pharmacy career here.
Can I ask a couple of questions with the board's indulgence? Hani, I don't mean to be indelicate, and I'm not trying to be when I ask a question. You said that you've made, I think it's 7 attempts to pass the examination. Is that right? The TOEFL?
10.
10, okay. Have you ever been evaluated to determine whether there might be some other issue that makes it difficult for you to pass that particular exam? And so it's the reason I'm asking this is, so for example, from time to time, as you know, the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy administers the FGPEE program, not the Board of Pharmacy. We accept their results from those. But from time to time, for example, an applicant who's taking the NAPLEX and the MPJE, they may have been diagnosed with attention deficit or some other issue that makes it more difficult for them to take tests. And if they are diagnosed in that, they may make an accommodations request under the Americans with Disabilities Act, whether it be for extra time on the test or quiet. Have you ever been evaluated to determine whether or not there might be some issue there that's making it more difficult for you to take the test?
No, sir.
Have you ever made any requests for any accommodation in taking the TOEFL, like extra time or quiet space or whatever that might be? Okay.
No, sir.
So you've studied independently and sought to keep taking the test as it is.
That's correct. Because all the policies for the TOEFL, there is any provision about mention that if you have any issue, you need to address it to the Board of Pharmacy.
Right. It's certainly correct that the instructions from NABP would be, if you wish to not have to take the exam to be licensed, that is something you would address to the Board of Pharmacy of the state. But there's a different issue, which is if you think that there might be some issue, some specific issue, and again, I'm not accusing you of anything or suggesting anything, but if, for example, there was a documented medical issue that made it difficult for you to take a particular test, testing conditions, that is something you would apply to NABP and say, I'm making a request for an Americans with Disabilities Act accommodation. Again, I'm just asking, and I think you've answered that, you've not pursued.
I mentioned to the center, they are conducting this test, that the test environment is like, because there's many test takers there, and it's really loud and noisy there when it comes to
Okay,
speaking.
and I'll get back to my question. Have you ever sought the services of a physician and said, hey, look, I don't know what's going on here. I'm having trouble passing this exam. I got all these, I need to be evaluated to make sure there's nothing else going on that might be, have you ever explored that option? Okay.
No, sir.
I just wanted to get that on the record. I don't have any further questions for Hani. There's some further background remarks I think both Mr. Pinion and I would like to make with respect to a request of this sort. But you guys may have questions for Hani or for us, and I certainly want you to have an opportunity to ask those questions. Or do you want to give the legal background now?
If we waive this, setting some precedent here we need to be aware of?
Well, the issue here is that Mr. Pinion and I are both of the opinion that you can't waive this. It is our rule specifically says these are the requirements for licensure. There's no exception to that built into the rule. The rule says you must have the examination in order to be to be eligible to test under NAPLEX and MPJE. The only provision under the law that we have for waiving is, as you all know, there's Rule 2510, which allows waivers of particular rules for pilot projects. Hani clearly is not asking for that, nor am I sure what a waiver of that sort would look like. We'd say, well, we're going to not require FGPEC and study that for some period of time. I don't think you have a legal basis to waive that requirement, short of deciding, if you were to decide, well, we don't think that we should require that at all, you could go through a rule amendment. Understand, I'm not remotely suggesting that, because the alternative would be, we would, if you wanted to go down that path, your choice would be, we'd either say we're striking it from the rule, as opposed to others to sit in that testing environment. And my suggestion would be that you explore that, because there might be, I'm not saying there is, and I'm making no guarantees, of course, but if that was an issue, it might be that there's an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act that could be made for taking the test rather than waiving the test. But as a matter of law, I don't see that there's any authority here short of publishing notice and comment to amend the rule. But you may feel differently. So, put that out there. I should note, by the way, and I'm sorry, Mrs. Day, and there is not, to my knowledge, there's not a limit on the number of times you can take.
No, sir.
Right, because I followed that. I thought I was correct on that. I'd run that down because, if there were some limit, you can only take it so many times and that's it, but there's not. We might have had a different conversation about whether or not the board might say, well, you can have another attempt, but he's not barred from continuing to take the exam. I'm sorry, Mrs. Day, I rudely interrupted.
No problem. Hi, honey. I just want to know if have you been given any sort of feedback of, kind of along the same questions Jay was asking, but have you been given the kind of feedback of what
you see this with applicants from whatever nationality and from whatever school that have suddenly find themselves with difficulties that seem otherwise hard to explain based on background, and it's what's indicated there is an evaluation to determine whether there's a ADHD or ADD type process or some other issue going on there that poses a particular barrier to a particular type of test-taking environment. And of course, that hasn't been explored, and I don't know whether that's here, but boy, looking at the constellation of factors, you can't help but wonder on that.
But the simple question is, you don't seem to believe that we can not require that unless we change the rule, which takes quite a bit. Is that right?
Unless the board were prepared to publish for notice and comment a rule amendment that would say either we don't require this exam anymore, or to set for a rule amendment that say we generally require it, but exceptions can be made, and here are what the criteria are, and put that in the rule. I don't see any way to do it, and Mr. Pinion has a different opinion of that. Again, the general waiver of a rule can only be done pursuant to 2510, and that's not what this request is.
Well, then if you just go by the facts and the facts alone, we can't even consider this request unless.
You could certainly consider it, and like I say, the board could decide, well, we want to engage on a
That's
rulemaking
what
to
I'm saying.
change the.
Our deliberation would be,
Right.
do we want to start rulemaking on this, which is a complicated procedure that preempts most everything we've done in the past, right?
Yes, yes.
Honey, there's an email dated May 14, 2015 to Mr. Campbell requesting a meeting. Did you personally write this email?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's very well written.
I just want to say also, like, I'm not being diagnosed by ADHD or that, like, I never went to doctor for any reason, like, beside my discipline. The only reason is just the time pressure that's in the test. It doesn't allow me to finish. I write, the requirement is 150 word in 20 minutes, and I write 200. But it's not enough for the, again, that these people, they are correcting or they evaluating my writing skill. They are human, past writing and reading. On July 11th, I took the test. I passed reading and listening, but I did not pass speaking and writing.
Mr. Campbell, is there a legitimate reason to consult NABP about this in any fashion?
I'm not sure what the nature of the consultation would be. We're not going to get any different information about Hani's results than what Hani has received from I mean, unless what you're describing is you would like to open up a dialogue with NABP about whether or not this is a psychometrically valid exam.
Well, I don't
which
think
is sort of
we're
the I think ultimately Hani's argument is, and I'm not impugning your argument at all, but I think ultimately his argument boils down to that he doesn't feel that what's being assessed in the TOEFL is what ought to be assessed.
Right.
That, at the end of the day, fundamentally is an argument that the TOEFL is either an invalid test generally or it's an invalid test for our purposes. I wouldn't recommend getting into that sort of dialogue for a whole lot of reasons, but if the question is specifically with respect to Hani, there's nothing that the test administrator would disclose. Hani, I guess, could authorize disclosure of whatever they've given him to us, but we're not going to get anything different than what.
And I know NABP does a lot of psychometric evaluation. I mean, they go to great lengths to validate their examinations.
Well, I think the other thing to keep
My
in mind,
curiosity from NABP would be how many people take it, what's the
right,
pass-fail
right.
rate. You know, those are general things, but again, I'm not sure how they would help us. in this
Right. I'm
situation.
sorry. I sort of jumped the rail on this. I'm sure that there are statistics we could be provided as to what the failure rate is on the TOEFL. And I'd be happy if it were the direction of the board. If you think it would be helpful to your consideration, I would be more than happy to request from NABP any information that they have that's available on that. I would suggest that I'm not sure how much it moves the ball forward because the overall statistics really aren't going to tell us anything about Hani's individual circumstances.
And we're not, and like you said earlier, we're not really at liberty to waive the requirement.
No, I think that requesting overall statistics would be relevant only insofar as the board had a concern that TOEFL is not a valid exam or not a useful exam, and you wanted to look at those overall statistics to further contemplate whether our rules should be amended to eliminate the exam requirement altogether or to put certain individualized considerations on that.
Connie, do you know? I mean, do you have any feel for the pass-fail rate?
I'm sorry.
Do you know what the pass-fail rate is for this exam?
Yes. There has to be an individual section. The pass rate for reading is 22, for listening 21, for speaking 26, and writing 24. All these out of 30.
But how many people out of 100 that take it pass it? Do you know?
No, sir.
No. Okay.
Right, honey, just so I'm clear, those were the scores you need to
The
achieve. Thanks, yeah. I wasn't sure if those were percentages, that's why.
What at this point do you need the board to do?
Well, Hani has made a request, and I wanted to make sure that he had an opportunity to fully and completely present his request to you. It's up to the board. Again, staff's advice is you don't have any legal authority to just waive this requirement. You could decide to say, Mr. Hani, we appreciate your request, but we're unable to grant it. Or you could decide you wanted to take it under advisement as part of a further study as to whether you wanted to amend the rules concerning TOEFL. That's really, I think those are the two options that are available to the board.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we, I guess, deny the request. While I am sympathetic to Mr. Hani's situation and his service to the Army Reserve at Fort Bragg, which I greatly appreciate you taking time to doing that. Based on what our constraints are as far as the legalities with NAVP, we cannot move forward on this. That'd be my motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Honey, thank you. Please stay in touch with me, though, about this going forward. Again, my advice would be you ought to talk to a physician about this, because I can't help but think there's something going on that a physician might be able to figure out that's going to remove whatever this particular block is. But stay in touch with me about that, if you would.
Sure.
Thank you, Honey.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Give me one moment, Mr. President. Got to switch files here.
We can't change it.
Next item on the agenda, Mr. President, there's a request for a modification of a reinstatement order from Charles, number 13996. Mr. Wetzel, it's good to see you again. Oh, and of course, you know Valanda, who's here from NCPRN with Mr. Wetzel. I have behind the appropriate tab in your board member information a summary of this case as well as one attachment. Mr. Wetzel, I'm going to go ahead. I mean, you've been here through one of these before, so you sort of know what the process is. I'm just going to introduce it to the board, talk about the background, have a few questions for you, probably for Valanda too, and we'll go from there. All right. Board members, attached behind your tab is a July 19, 2011 board order that reinstated Mr. Wetzel's license with certain conditions. The background, as indicated in that order, is that Mr. Wetzel surrendered his license to practice pharmacy in October of 2010 after admitting diversion of tramadol from his then place of practice for personal use. After a period of treatment and monitoring by NCPRN on July 19, 2011, the board reinstated Mr. Wetzel's license to practice pharmacy with certain conditions. Those conditions include that Mr. Wetzel obtained prior approval of employment by the board's executive director, that he not serve as a pharmacist manager, that he not serve as a preceptor of pharmacy students, and that he not work more hours per week than is authorized by NCPRN. Mr. Wetzel has requested that the practice restrictions on his license be lifted. I think animating part of the background of this request is that Mr. Wetzel is scheduled to complete successfully his NCPRN contract is it February of 2000? January of 2016. I apologize on that. And so I think certainly NCPRN supports this request, which we'll get on the record shortly. And I think animating this also is NCPRN's general desire that a patient who is a client, of theirs who has done well under the agreement have a period of time without restrictions before the completion of the contract to provide appropriate monitoring. So with that then, Cindy, if you will swear in both Valanda and Mr. Wetzel.
Sir, I can't tell if you're right there.
Mr. Wetzel, if you would state your name for the record.
My name is Charles Wetzel.
And Mr. Wetzel, you presently hold license to practice pharmacy number 13996, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Or at least you'll accept I gave the right number, right? And that's
Absolutely.
and I stated the background of both your initial surrender of your license in 2010 and then the reinstatement of that license in 2011. Is there anything that I did not say correctly or that you need to add to that? Mr. Wetzel, you've requested that that the conditions, the practice-related conditions on your order be lifted. If you would, explain to the board why and why now?
Well, first, thank you for your time and the opportunity actually to be, again, a pharmacist. I love it. Okay, that being said, why now and why? I think primarily just to move forward. There are many opportunities in pharmacy that you may be aware of, different employment practices, many opportunities within the profession itself. I think that would, for me, that would serve me well, as well it would serve my employer. I'm not suggesting now that I have any opportunities looking forward that that may come out of this, but if there was a need, then I could fill that slot. And that being said, and why now is I've been basically informed that, you know, NCPRN and the board would like, you know, like maybe 6 months out of that lift of the restrictions to see how I perform. Again, I do not have a position available at this time, and I'm not really looking for a position, but moving forward, that would give the board and anybody else the opportunity to assess or evaluate my performance.
Mr. West, if I could ask you, have you been employed as a pharmacist since your license was reinstated in 2011?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Have you been continuously employed since your license was reinstated as a pharmacist?
Oh, no. No, it took about a year, I think about a year and a half actually, to actually get another position.
And of course, under your your order as it stands, you had to have that employment approved. And who was it you were employed by ultimately?
Omnicare.
By Omnicare. And I will stipulate for the record that Mr. Wetzel, as his order required to do, requested approval from the board's executive director, and after consultation with the pharmacist manager at Omnicare, I did approve that employment. So have you been continuously employed with Omnicare since that time as a pharmacist?
Yes, sir.
And during that period of time, what's your workload been? Have you practiced full time?
No. Originally I started out with a PRN position, part-time hours, and I'm trying to remember now. It's been about a year since I've worked, but the 40 hours, which is really the maximum.
Right. You've been working a
Yeah.
full-time schedule for
Yes.
at least a year at Omnicare after the PRN point, right?
Yeah.
And during that time, Mr. Wetzel, have you ever been disciplined by your employer for anything that you did improperly or as a pharmacist with Omnicare?
No.
I will stipulate for the record, there's been no complaint made to the board about any action or about any aspect of your practice in that period of time. Would you describe for the board members briefly what your workplace responsibilities are at Omnicare?
Wow.
You don't have to go into elaborate detail. I just give the board members, a general idea of what your full-time practice involves.
I've just been really blessed with the opportunities, but some of it deals with order entry, making sure that orders are completed, assessed, prescriptions are validated, and assessing the appropriateness of the medication to the residents or patients. And there's basically a checking system to make sure that it's the correct medicine as well at the back end of the pharmacy. So it's pretty much just assessing the validity of the prescription and necessity and or appropriateness actually, and just looking for any mistakes, any inconsistencies, and reassuring that it's the proper medication going out to that patient.
Have your responsibilities increased over time?
Yes, sir, they have.
Would you say they've increased substantially over time?
Substantially, I wouldn't say no. Well, I mean,
you went from working PRN to
yeah,
full-time, right? So
right. So
I'm not trying to lay traps here.
No, it's okay. No, it's just that right now I'm part of like a performance improvement committee on there, and we work out areas of improvement within the pharmacy to make it a better pharmacy, whether it's preventing med errors or just looking for things, problems within the pharmacy system itself that may improve the way we care for residents. So I'm very honored with that too.
Mr. Wetzel, I think we got on the record that I believe you are on track to successfully complete your PRN contract in January of 2016. In the course of how would you describe your compliance with your NCPRN monitoring agreement over the past, I guess, 4.5 years?
I'm pleased with it. It hasn't been easy sometimes, but I've been complying. I think one point, and that was due to some financial mismanagement, perhaps. There's a lot of blessings that I get out of this, and one of them actually. I don't know how much detail you want me to get into.
Much as you want to provide.
But during this period, I didn't realize how much I could handle and what was given to me. And as oddly as it sounds, bankruptcy was in the plans for me. And I learned a lot through that process itself. And so...
Mr. Wetzel, you'd mentioned one instance of receiving non-compliance points from PRN. Would you just elaborate on that a little bit? What was that for and when was it?
I missed the payment.
Mm-hmm.
Missed the payment.
And when was that?
2012.
Has there been any points assessed or non-compliance since then? In 2012, it was pretty early going in the contract. Is that right? Oftentimes, well, and just put it this way, Mr. Wetzel, if you were, I know you said you don't presently have an opportunity, for example, to be a pharmacist manager, but if one were to come along, you'd agree, weren't you, that if you're a pharmacist manager, there's a lot more stress and responsibility involved in a position like that. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
And oftentimes PRN clients will talk about sort of their emergency plan, or I forget what the exact phrase is, Philanda, for that. Relapse prevention plan. Do you have a relapse prevention plan?
I have a network that's amazing for me. And whether it's seeing, I don't know if I should mention names, but going back to counseling, that's something that, from time to time I will do that. Then I have a network of friends. I make phone calls. And I've certainly learned more about stress management.
And then I recall that you testified as to all these things in 2011 too. Is that, and so is it fair to say you feel like you've carried through on the building of that network and your management since then?
I've certainly grown.
Yeah. I don't have any further questions for Mr. Wetzel. Board members may. I got a couple of questions for Valanda.
When you miss a paper, do they pretty quick let you know that?
Sir, you know
No
the
answer
next-
needed.
Well, we'll characterize that as a rhetorical question.
Totally rhetorical. Exactly. I saw her smiling, so I got the answer out of it.
Ms. Day, do you have questions?
Yes, thank you. I was just curious about the reason that you were taking the tramadol, and we certainly don't want to retry you or anything like that, but has that situation resolved, or what's happened to the motivation?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm not the same person I was, and just from my attitude, and it's not even that, it's just the way I react to things. You know, I think back then I mentioned I was a machine, and I'm not that person anymore, thankfully. Yeah, so.
So you had a pain issue, though you had a physical issue back in when when the diversion was happening, and now that's resolved? Or?
Oh, yes.
So you did have a pain condition?
Well,
I mean, it's a reason to take it for pain, or?
Ma'am, you can call it emotional pain.
Okay.
You know, that's just how a lot of addiction works, unfortunately. And it's not something necessarily I'm proud of, but what's grown is something that it's just amazing for me. So.
Any other questions? Do you have questions for?
I would like to ask Valanda a few questions. Sure. Valanda, if you would state your name for the record.
Sure, I'm Valanda Nelson, the Executive Director of the North Carolina Pharmacy Recovery Network.
And Valanda, you of course heard Mr. Wetzel just testify as to his program of recovery. Would you characterize for the board members his progress and compliance with the PRN program?
Sure.
today?
Mr. Wetzel has done extremely well with his NCPRN contract. It's very rare to have someone getting ready to complete their contract with having only had one non-compliance point. I think that one point for non-payment really got his attention. So he has had no further issues with non-compliance.
And I think the answer to this question is more than obvious, but so I can say I asked it and it's on the record. Was that instance of non-compliance, in your clinical opinion, indicative of relapse behavior?
No, it's not.
And has there been any other behavior over the course of, I guess now almost past 4 years, that would indicate to you from a clinical perspective that Mr. Wetzel is at particular risk of relapse?
No.
Valanda, it's again, so we can get on the record coming from you, is it your clinical opinion that lifting of restrictions prior to the completion of PRN monitoring is an appropriate thing? And if so, why is that?
It's very appropriate. It gives NCPRN an opportunity to monitor should he decide to take the next step forward in his career as a pharmacy manager. It'll give us an opportunity to monitor and make sure that he's able to handle it.
In your clinical opinion, Valanda, would the roughly 6 months or 5 months remaining, in your clinical opinion, is that an appropriate amount of time to monitor for that the recovery remains strong, that, or would there be any clinical indication for extending the PRN?
No, I don't believe so.
In his case,
In his case,
given
right.
his background.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I know the answer to this, but I have to ask it so it's on the record. In your clinical opinion, is lifting of what would be restrictions 3, 4, 5, and 6 in Mr. Wetzel's July 2011 order, is that clinically appropriate?
Yes, it is.
And in your opinion, he would be safe and competent to practice pharmacy without those restrictions on his ability to practice?
That's correct.
I have no further questions for Valanda, if board members do.
In the one relapse situation, was that alcohol or drugs or what?
I wanted to stipulate for if I was not clear about that, there was no relapse. I asked Valanda if the one non-compliance point
All right.
did indicate relapse, and she said no, it was a missed payment. I'm sorry, I may have goofed that up when I asked.
Mr. Wetzel, we have a number of students in the audience. Is there anything you're willing to share with them about this experience in terms of emotional costs, financial cost of what may have precipitated this? Anything you can share with the students so they can learn from this?
I would say that that now I believe that some of the pharmacy schools they're more attuned to the cause of the addiction, and that it's something that I did not I would not have benefited from. I mean, I did not get that, and we didn't discuss it when I graduated, basically, and that. In that, I guess everybody has their own journey, basically. I think everybody has their own journey, and that it's important just to stay true to who you are, or try to find out, continually grow, and get out of your comfort zones, and just grow as individuals. But for me, my experience, I never saw it coming. I definitely think it's something to learn from, and continue to take education requirements for, and just I guess be alert, be cautious.
Can you share the approximate financial costs? Yeah, I mean, you're not under any obligation to do this.
I'm telling you, the devastation. I have 2 daughters and a loving wife, and the financial impact of the bankruptcy alone, we were just blessed, okay, to walk away with something. And bankruptcy is not something that I ever thought was in my future. And I'm very sorry for the pain that caused the profession and those individuals involved. But I'm still trying to recover from the bankruptcy and credit reporting process. But again, the way I can communicate with my daughters now, it's a gift. And pain brings out a lot of people. I just didn't know how to deal with it.
Thank you. Will of the board?
I move that we grant the request to drop those conditions that were put upon his licensure when it was reestablished.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And if I may, Mr. President, so it's clear on there, so the motion would be to lift restrictions 3, 4, 5, and 6 on Mr. Wetzel's July 19, 2011 order. Other conditions of the order would remain in effect.
All in favor? Any opposed? None. Congratulations.
Mr. Wetzel, congratulations, and I will send to you and to Valanda a copy of an order that lifts those 4 conditions. Best of luck to you. All right. Again, Mr. President, I apologize. I need to reshuffle here. Next item on the agenda, Mr. President, I do have a short legislative update, and it is short indeed. Couple things to update on bills that I have been reporting to throughout the current legislative session. Senate Law 154, clarifying the Good Samaritan Law, certain amendments to that. It was signed into law on June 19th. With respect to the effect on pharmacy, the only effect is that it clarifies that standing orders for naloxone are appropriate. I'm going to circle back to that when I give a report on the Overdose Prevention Summit, and that pharmacists who dispense naloxone in compliance with that statute enjoy the same immunities that a prescriber or someone who administered naloxone enjoy. House 647, which is prescribing of epinephrine auto-injectors. Recall, this is a statute that essentially would authorize entity-level prescribing of epinephrine auto-injectors. There's been no change on that since the June meeting. It has passed the House. It still indicates it's sitting in Senate Rules Committee. Its provisions have not been bundled into the budget bill that's currently under consideration, but it seems to me like this is a bill that's probably going to go through, but there's no change on that. Certainly, if it is passed, the primary responsibility that the board's going to have is education of pharmacists, and I'm certainly prepared to produce materials for that as soon as that bill is passed, if it is passed. House 760 is now the Regulatory Reform Act. That was previously House 765. The provisions in 765 were, I'm sorry, I got that exactly backward. House 760, all of its provisions have been poured into House 765. Again, just a reminder of the couple of things that are particularly relevant in the Regulatory Reform Act is one, a specific direction to the Joint Legislative Administrative Procedure Oversight Committee to draft proposed legislation to implement the PED's recommendations with respect to occupational licensing agencies. The deadline on that would be by the start of the short session in January of 2016. And the provision remains in there that would prohibit any occupational licensing board from contracting or employing a person listed by the board to serve as an investigator or inspector if the licensee is actively practicing in the profession or occupation over which the board has jurisdiction. This bill, because of the budget stuff going on, I think this bill's been sidetracked a little bit. I think where it is there's a House version and a Senate version that need to be reconciled. We'll keep you posted on that. Some occupational licensing boards are still concerned with that prohibition on hiring or contracting with licensees to serve as investigators and inspectors. I think Clint and I don't have super heartburn about that, but it could be a challenge for some of the smaller boards, and we'll see how that plays out. So that's where we are. Again, with respect to specific bills speaking to pharmacy or to occupational licensing boards, been relatively quiet because of the budget stuff. So that's all I've got right now on that. Also, certainly any questions I'm happy to answer, and also give a brief update on rulemaking. One, our amendments to Rule 3301, those are the technician amendments. Those did go into effect on July 1st, 2015. Do want to advise all of you here on the record, in order to implement the option for technicians who only practice at a free clinic to register without paying a fee, there's a programming change we need to make to our online system. I have advised all pharmacist managers around the state that if they are pharmacist manager at a free or charitable clinic, that yes, this went into effect July 1st. However, nobody here is going to be upset with them that they don't get the registration done until we get that programming change made. So as soon as that programming change is made, I will send out a further notice to pharmacist managers. But as you certainly would have expected with the kinds of folks who our pharmacist manager frequently, is they wanted to be sure they were doing things right, as they always were, and so I communicate with them. They need not worry. As soon as we get the programming done, we'll get that taken care of. Rule 1801, which, as you know, were the amendments designed to conform our statements regarding valid prescribing practices with the Med Board's position. That went before the Rules Review Commission last week. And Clint, do you want to report on that?
Nothing happened at the meeting, and no objections were filed, and so it will now be effective on August 1st.
Proposed amendments, just a reminder, is proposed amendments to Rule 2612, which came from the DME subcommittee concerning DME trained employees and at off-site storage facilities. That's still scheduled for a public hearing in September. And then the one other rulemaking we have underway is, as you know from the last meeting, to publish a amendment for notice and comment concerning remote medication order entry and its availability even when a pharmacy is open 24/7. So that's where we are on all of those. Any questions I'm happy to answer.
Question on back to the legislative update.
Sure.
House Bill 760. Was that statement about employing or contracting with someone that's active in the profession a result of the dental board?
No, I don't think it is. My understanding, again, I'm sort of getting out of an area where I admit my information is not as clear as it probably ought to be, which may be true for most things where I'm concerned. But I think the specific thing that came up was there, and Clint may know some of this too. I think it was the engineering board or one of the technical trade boards. There was some complaint that was made by licensees that board would employ. I think really actually they were contracting with active licensees and to investigate other licensees who were at least asserted that they were business competitors of the investigator and were concerned that they were not being given a fair treatment as a result of that. So it's nothing that came out of the dental board case. And some of these smaller boards, Bill, they don't have a lot of employees. So they're very small boards, and as the need for an investigation comes along, they will go in and contract with somebody to do that investigation. So I think it would be more fair to say that this ties in better with the PED report than it does with anything coming out of the dental board case, and that sort of this overall theme about if you have small boards that can't administer their practice act with their existing resources, what changes might need to be made. But no, I think this predates substantially the dental board decision.
So we could hire a pharmacist to be an investigator as long as the pharmacist wasn't actively practicing as a pharmacist.
That's correct. That's correct. Thank you. Other questions on that? All righty. I think I will turn it over to Gail then for the financial report.
Good morning. I think under your first financial tab, or the first report under your financial tab, is the memo to Mr. Campbell with a summary of our June activity. And so if you'll look at the next report, our balance sheet, line 6, our total cash is $7.88 million. Our line 30, our total assets is $9.68 million, and line 44 under liabilities and fund balance, our excess revenues over expenditures so far this fiscal year is $1.55 million, and total liabilities and fund balance is $9.68 million. The next report is the statement of our revenue and expenditures for the 9 months ending June 30th. And line 25, our total revenues, first column is 3.99 million. Our budget to date for June is 3.7 million, and currently at June, our variance with over budget for revenues is 240,716. Our annual budget for revenues is 3.9 million. So our annual variance at June 30th is 51,205. So we will be over budget on our revenues for the fiscal year. Expenditures, line 75. Our total expenditures at June 30th is 2.4 million. The budget is 2.6. That's a variance of 176,371 under budget, and our total annual budget for expenditures is 3.4 million. It appears that most items are on budget. Under our revenues, our largest variances so far are the reciprocity fees, the pharmacy permits, and the DME permits. And our reciprocity meeting yesterday, I think there were 90-some candidates, so we'll definitely be over budget on revenues, which is good. And for the expenditures, our variance right now is 176,371 under budget, but our largest variances there are inspection expenses, consulting, legal fees, and vehicles. But most of these expense lines will even out by the end of our fiscal year, because it's a matter of just the time of budgeting and versus the invoicing. Does anyone have any questions?
Can I add a couple of things? One is, and particularly for Mr. McLaughlin, Mrs. Day, Mr. Minton, we will be beginning next week our internal process to put together a proposed budget. We're meeting on that to put something together, which we will have to you guys substantially in advance of our scheduled August Finance Committee meeting.
Well, if it'd be any help to you, since you have you're not spending enough money, you could just give all the board members 25,000 each, you'll get right back up into your budget.
I'll second that.
And
I'll pretend I'm going to use the Jedi mind trick. These aren't the droids you're looking.
And on a more serious note, where are all these pharmacists? We got 99 and then
We had yesterday. It was unbelievable. Joey was here yesterday for a hearing conference. We were packed to the gills in this room and the other conference room. I don't know what that was. I think that was the largest single reciprocity day we've ever had. Certainly the largest since I've been here.
Yeah, 80 next month.
And I asked a couple, again, I'm relying on anecdotal reports, but I asked, I said, is the job market that good here, or is it that bad where you're coming from? And the ones I talked to said the job market here is pretty good. You would certainly think so, or these are a whole lot of irrational people spending a lot of money and time to get licensed here, because part of me wondered, is this uptick a product of remote medication order entry companies that have to be individually licensed? But I really can't attribute this type of increase in the numbers.
Most of them actually going to physically locate here?
Yeah. I was in here, and then we were sort of simulcasting the talk in the other room, and I said, how many of you are getting licensed, but you aren't planning to move here or be here? And in this room, there are only 2 who raised their hands. I don't know what it was like in the other room, but yeah, got to be 90% of them or more coming here. So whatever gloom and doom there is reports about the job market, it must not be that gloomy or that doomy. So
must be a great place to be a pharmacist. Thank you.
Everybody loves North Carolina.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
And just to echo that, so a non-resident permit does not require a North Carolina license.
And that's a matter of statute. The Pharmacy Practice Act specifies that an out-of-state pharmacy permit does not require that any individual pharmacist have a license to practice pharmacy in North Carolina. Rather, the statute specifies that the pharmacy must designate a person who is the pharmacist manager and who agrees to ensure and be responsible for the permit's compliance with North Carolina law. But that's a matter of statute. The states are, I think, pretty evenly split as to whether they require that. About half don't require an individual license. About half will require that maybe at least one pharmacist have an individual license.
It seemed to be the trend 3 or 4 years ago. There were several states that went that way.
That went that way, but then it seems to have sort of petered out for whatever reason. Josh, you want to give an investigator report?
A bunch of pharmacists. Got 16 pharmacists. Pharmacy schools back there, like 4,000.
All right, well, things are moving along quite swimmingly in the Investigation and Inspections Department. You see, as of 17th, we have a total of 131 complaints. As usual, the procedural legal are leading the pack. Errors have taken a slight uptick at 28%, and diversion is still up, 26%. Again, we're still probably on track to hit about 300 complaints for the year, is about where we normally are. The next page on the surrenders, we've had a few more here since the last board meeting. We're up to 21 for the technicians and 12 for the pharmacists, and still stuck at 2 for the pharmacies. And I know there's a couple of things we have for closed session. Otherwise, like I said, things are moving along well. New people are doing well. They're still in the midst or towards the end of their training. They've been with their field training coordinators and then a couple other investigators throughout. And Crystal and I keep getting some good reports for the folks that we've hired. So very, very pleased with the crew that we have at the present time.
Can you elaborate on the diversions? I mean, is there any trends, any area of prevention that we can implement?
I don't know that there's trends. I mean, I tell a lot of folks, when somebody wants something bad enough, they're going to get it. It doesn't seem like whatever you do, there's nothing that's 100% that's going to keep these folks from diverting. I think it's almost the same way as the, not even uptick, but I mean, we get burglary reports every week from pharmacies, and, Joey knows as well. I mean, if no matter what you do, no matter the gates you put up, the glass you put in, the cameras you put up, folks are going to find a way to get what they want. Technicians have always kind of led the pack, I think, just because of they're the ones who are more likely to go out and then sell it for the money rather than have the addiction problems. And I think it's probably just because of either financial troubles they're in or what technicians are currently being paid these days. But I mean, as far as medication-wise for diversion, I mean, it's still your regular players, your hydrocodone, alprazolam, oxycodone, OxyContin. Those are the big players. Once in a while, you'll get some of the lifestyle drugs that are diverted, but that's pretty rare. I wish there was something else I could think of for prevention. Again, I try to encourage, pharmacists when they call me on the phone about certain things. If they don't have, cameras in their pharmacy, that's still a little bit shocking to me that even in this day, there are still pharmacies being built or ones that are still in existence, that don't have any sort of cameras whatsoever. Other than maybe the one that's over the cash register at the front door or a camera at the front door. But, again, I try to say, do what you can with your budget or whoever controls the money, to get some sort of video system in there, because that is probably one of the best tools, that us and law enforcement can have, and to make sure if you're going to spend that money for it, buy something that's quality. Some of the stuff you see on TV, for this report or that report, a lot of the stuff you see is so grainy and so unclear. Spend a few extra dollars, to help. It could save somebody's life one day. It could help solve a murder one day, or, a series of violent robberies. If you get good quality video and pictures of folks, who are committing the crimes and the burglaries as well.
And you mentioned break-ins. That's none of the numbers reflected
sir.
here include anything about
No, nothing like that. That's just, the loss reports we get in on a daily basis. And again, there are multiple break-ins that we get, every week. It doesn't matter if it's a chain or if it's a independent pharmacy. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
All right.
If I could, I'm going to have Ms. Perham come up and report to you on the results of the DME subcommittee election. There's an awful lot of data to go through, so it may take a while.
Well, DME subcommittee election for the rehabilitation technology supplier ended the end of June, and we had 9 votes, and it was for Mr. Ed Dressen. He was up for re-election, and of course he won. So he will serve for the next 4 years, and we won't have another election until 2018.
We do need the board members, if it's your pleasure, to go ahead and pass a motion to certify the election results in that DME subcommittee election.
Mr. President, make a motion to affirm the election results as read.
Second?
Second.
Stay seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. President, let me ask your pleasure on this. We're getting close to 11:45, obviously, from the Aroma launches here. There are a few more things to go through. None of them are particularly long. I don't want to see what the pleasure of the board is. Do you want to go ahead and power through the remaining issues and then go to lunch, or would you rather Andy is, UNC, with respect to reports to the board, Wendy Cox from UNC let us know she wasn't going to be here, couldn't be here today. I don't think there's anybody here from Wingate in an official capacity for reporting for the school. But Andy can certainly speak to you from the Campbell perspective as well. So if you want, we have Andy go ahead and do that and then break for lunch or power, whatever you guys want to do.
Let's keep going.
All right.
I agree.
Thus we shall do it. Quickly, a reminder, the 2015 NABP District 3 meeting is August 15th through the 18th in St. Augustine, Florida. Again, Cindy, who is the Secretary Treasurer of NABP District 3 Corporation, can help you with any or all of that. How many folks are going? Gene, you're going. Bill, you're going. Robert, you're going. It's good.
What's the deadline?
I think the hotel block is about.
Missed the hotel block rate, but registration.
We can still take care of it if you're free to go. So let Cindy know, all who want to come on that. Like I say, I've got an anticipation there's going to be a lot of free time available. Board member retreat on September 24th. I just did want a couple of things on that. I sent out an email. We'd like to go ahead and start that retreat in the morning if it works for everybody. Leslie has made certain that there is room availability for Wednesday night. Those who would like to go ahead and come Wednesday or if you wanted, but I would propose that we go ahead and start at 9 a.m. on Thursday, September 24th. Our plan is to redo the statutory training that's required so we can get everybody synced on the same calendar. Andy, you're welcome. I would encourage you to come to that, even though it's too early to train you, but nonetheless, it wouldn't be bad to participate in that. So we can get that done, and we've got a number of topics on the retreat agenda that I have been assembling. So what I will do, Mr. Mixon, I will send that to you, what I've got to you to take a look at, and then can circulate to everybody if there are additional things that you would like to have on that. But I've kept a fairly substantial agenda list together. So we're all in agreement on that on Thursday in the morning, because I need to confirm with the hotel. All right, seeing yeses.
Starting at 8, 9.
I had suggested 9. I mean, if you want to start at 8, that's fine with me. I don't know. Yeah, Carol is vigorously shaking her head no on that. So,
We still have the dinner that night too?
we do have the dinner at Liberty Oaks that evening, and we'll have lunch at Printworks. I know it's not you anymore, but we'll have lunch at Printworks. But I think if we start at 9, we got plenty of time to get what we need done. Just a quick update on staff implementation of NABP program review recommendations. We are heavily engaged internally at looking at assembling what would be our requirements and needs list for the upgrade of IT technology, with a goal to assembling that so as we go out into the market to look to see what products and vendors are available. We can be as specific as we can be with our needs to make sure we're selecting an appropriate vendor. So we are working on that process internally now. Brenda McDougall, who some of you know, she is the Associate Executive Director of the Board of Nursing, and she's in charge of operations. She's the Board of Nursing's Kristen, I guess would be the easiest way to describe it. And Brenda, we've retained Brenda to come over and help facilitate internally our figuring out how to move through this process, because she shepherded the Board of Nursing through exactly this process 3 years ago. So Brenda's helping us with that and making sure that as we figure out what our needs are, we are channeling ourselves appropriately. The plan is that we will have some purely internal review completed by September 4th. Then Brenda will facilitate some internal departmental meetings shortly thereafter, and then we'll be in a position to start going out into the market and see who's available. Now, we're not going to be pulling the trigger on any sort of massive contract for IT upgrade until we bring that before you. But again, for purposes of budgeting for 2015-16, we're not planning to budget any of this expense out of recurring revenue. We plan to pull this out of our substantial reserves, so it won't pause us on the budgeting process. So I'll keep you up to date on that. Again, many of those, there's a subset of the program review recommendations that require this board's consideration, and those are on the list of topics for the retreat. We have gathered some suggested IT vendors, and Kristen and Debbie, I think Cindy, you've done this, and Tom Budell has as well. So we're starting to take a look to see what's out there in the market. And we will certainly keep you apprised of that. This is a big project, but one that we need to do.
So explain that further. I mean, this is coming out of the NABP report?
Correct. Recall that NAB report had a number of suggestions about how we could leverage our information systems in a way to really cut down. We do a good job with it, but we don't do a great job with it. And there are additional capabilities that NABP suggested we look into with our licensing database, our investigations database, so that we can move more things online, automate more licensing processes, particularly so that staff are spending less time moving paper around the office and are spending more time speaking with licensees and the public and the like. It's an efficiency in organization. There are also some metrics right now that we can't track in any great way about as a license moves from one step to the next step to the next step, or as an investigation moves through. And so this is also would leverage our IT systems to build in more metrics and statuses that would update automatically as certain things happen, so we can get a better idea of where snags in our workload are. So.
But as far as reporting to NABP, we're
Oh, no, yeah, we're not reporting back to NAVP. No, we're taking their suggestions they made, and we're looking at trying to implement a great many of those. Again, for this piece, almost entirely through IT stuff. There are other sort of departmental changes that some of which we had done before we even got NAVP's. But then there are a number of suggestions NAVP recommended for consideration with respect to board meeting schedule, with respect to in-person appearances and the like, and those require your consideration and recommendation. So we'll discuss those at the retreat. And the document that I've been putting together for the retreat stuff compiles all of that and the explanation. So I'll get that out to you by the end of the day today. Very good. Quickly, North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services hosted an overdose prevention summit at the Friday Center last week, and I was invited to go attend that. As you might imagine, it was a very wide-ranging, it was not a pharmacy-specific type of, very wide-ranging discussion of how the efforts that North Carolina is making to reduce fatalities from overdoses, prevent diversion, et cetera. Speakers from clinicians, law enforcement, licensing boards, practitioners, you name it. One of the things I wanted to specifically mention to all of you to see is there much of the discussion at that event centered around naloxone distribution and how the data are showing that the distribution of naloxone has had a demonstrable and significant impact on reducing overdose deaths. There was much discussion, including from the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition, about there being an ability for pharmacies, or pharmacists, I should say, to independently provide naloxone to patients, caregivers, family members, whoever is, without the requirement of receiving an external prescription. As it stands, there's much effort going on to implement fairly broad standing orders for that, for pharmacies that want to participate. The Med Board's entirely supportive of that. I was asked about that. I stated that I did not purport to take any stance on your behalf. That's your prerogative. What I did state was that to go to a system which has been implemented in a lot of states, whereby pharmacists could, of their independent authority, say you or someone who needs naloxone, that would require a statutory change, because it is essentially a prescribing authority that would require authorization by the statute. There seems to be some interest by the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition to go forward with looking at that as a statutory change. I am scheduled to meet with one of their officers next week to see what their thoughts are, and I'll report back to you on that immediately. And I'm really not sure if they're looking to try to do something in this legislative session, because it's getting mighty late in the day for that, or whether they're looking toward the short session. But certainly I'm happy to take any suggestion or comment you have going into this meeting, but my plan for the meeting was to listen to what they have to say and what they're thinking about, and then report back to you and let you know what may be on the table. Okay, the last thing then I think I have before the consent agenda and Andy is CPP Joint Subcommittee. There's been all of a sudden a fair amount of movement on some things from the Med Board side about CPP issues. Just first by reorientation, at our July meeting last year, the board designated Mr. Mixon, Mrs. Day, Mr. McLaughlin, and Mr. Minton as the board's 4 delegates to the CPP Joint Subcommittee. You certainly could change that, or Mr. President, that's entirely at your discretion. Are those still the folks who want to be our delegates to the CPP Joint Subcommittee? And if everybody does want to do that, we don't need to go through any more falderall.
It appears that those members are still willing to serve.
Very good. Well, so some things that have happened. Some of our staff and some of the medical board staff met the other week, and the medical board staff has raised the potential transfer of complete responsibility for the CPP application and administration process to the Board of Pharmacy. The way it works now, you guys know, we get the applications, we have a process here internally for approval, and then those go over to the Med Board. They have a process they go through over there, and the Med Board maintains the roster. They handle the renewals, all of that sort of stuff for CPPs. Medical board staff would like to transfer that responsibility to the Board of Pharmacy. And I think what they've reported is driving is that I think the Med Board is starting to view CPPs the way they view nurse practitioners. And nurse practitioners, this is how it evolved. For a long time, the Med Board had the predominant responsibility for registration and regulation of nurse practitioners. And as that practice matured, things got shifted back to the home licensing board, for lack of a better term. I think the Med Board staff is interested in having that happen as well for CPPs. We had a very positive exchange of views on that at a staff level. And I don't want to get into the pros and cons of this. I'm just saying this is an issue that the CPP Joint Subcommittee needs to discuss. So that's one issue. Another issue is a potential amendments to the CPP rules, which the Med Board staff is supportive of, that again designed to align CPP regulation more with nurse practitioners, and in two respects. One would be allowing, I think a lot of you know CPPs most often these days are practicing group practices, and it creates certain administrative difficulties of who's the supervising physician or physicians and who do they have to consult with and that. And the Med Board staff is receptive to a potential amendment to the CPP rules, which would allow a CPP to designate a principal supervising physician and then backup supervising physicians to greatly simplify practice for CPPs in group settings. That's exactly what the nurse practitioner rules allow. That would require a rule change. That would need to be something that the CPP Joint Subcommittee would debate and decide how to go forward. And then related to that would be a potential amendment to extend, right now CPP rules require a weekly face-to-face consultation between the CPP and the supervising physician. A potential amendment to match the consultation frequency requirements to those of nurse practitioners, which is monthly for the first 6 months of an NP's practice and then every 6 months afterward. Again, certainly can discuss these, but the idea is these are the issues that the CPP Joint Subcommittee needs to get together and discuss. These are fairly meaty, and the Med Board has suggested a couple of dates, be Tuesday, September 15th or Tuesday, November 17th. In the evening, that would be after our meetings here and the night before their meetings in Raleigh, so it's a way to get everybody together. So sounds like the four of you are willing to continue to serve. What would you like me to report back to the Med Board about a preferred date? Is September better than November, November better than September?
I assume we get it done
in September. Fine with me. Does that sound good to y'all? I'll communicate and tell them that September is certainly your preferred date, and if they're okay with that, I'll report
What's the day
back.
in September?
What's that?
What's the day in September?
September 15th. So this would be Mr. Mix and Mrs. Day, Mr. Minton, and Mr. McLaughlin on that one. But it's the night, Stan, it's the night after our monthly board meeting. There's no reason you couldn't stay and be at the meeting if you wanted to.
Be fine.
Well, I will get that out to the Med Board and report back on their availability. With that then, board members, I'll invite board member-elect Dr. Andy Bowman to come and address the board.
Not really doing this on behalf of Campbell today, but since I'm here and I just got back.
You're disclaiming agency power for
Campbell.
Campbell.
I'm not speaking necessarily on behalf of Campbell, but this would be consistent with some information gained at AACP. Just got back about a week ago from that American Academy of American Associations of Colleges of Pharmacy. Some things that I think you guys might be interested in, and since I'm here, Jay asked that I speak, and so As you probably know already, the national applicant pool is a big discussion among the schools of pharmacy. Pharmacy schools are now suffering the same plight as the law schools have suffered. Jay and Clint can probably speak to that as they stay tuned in to their profession and education that they received. There just doesn't seem to be enough students to go around. Now, from the perspective of Campbell and UNC and even Wingate, it's still a newer school. I think most of our programs here in our state still feel good about our overall applicant pool. But when you start looking at some of the newer programs nationally, and you start talking to colleagues at other colleges of pharmacy, you find out that it appears that some people are being accepted that wouldn't have been accepted previously, and what does that mean for the profession? And so I think from a global perspective or a national perspective, it's certainly something we need to keep our eye on. Within our own state, it's always nice to have more kids to pick from, but I think we have some quality programs that are good at fleshing out the best and doing what we can with the pool that's presented to us. Recognizing, obviously, that a part of this is that there's over 130 pharmacy schools in the country now, if you don't know those numbers. And they seem to continue to pop up despite some people's assertion that we've got too many already. The state of California now has 13 colleges of pharmacy. 13. Now, that's a big state. But that's a lot of pharmacy schools. If you need some perspective that's a little more geographic to us, think back to Tennessee. I can recall as a young faculty member at Campbell University and even as a student, that we would get students from Tennessee pretty readily, and our classes would have a good little influence of volunteer students. And I had at least 5 or 6 classmates that were from Tennessee. That was because the only pharmacy school in the state of Tennessee was in Memphis. And either people didn't like traveling all the way to Memphis, or maybe they weren't big B.B. King fans, but regardless, they would go east as opposed to west, and they would come to Campbell and other places to pharmacy schools because it was just as close for them if they lived in the eastern part of the state. Well, time went on, and East Tennessee State was able to navigate opening up another state pharmacy school in the state of Tennessee, but that wasn't enough. Lipscomb came along, Belmont came along, Lincoln Memorial University came along, and then South College being the most recent new program, and that's in Knoxville. And so they've got up to 6 pharmacy schools in the state of Tennessee, whereas just not too many years ago, we only had 1. So an interesting thing to look at from a standpoint of geography. Technician programs was discussed at length. Obviously, the growth and development of that particular group of people continues to be a hot topic. This will be of interest that by the year 2020, all technician training programs will have to be approved, accredited, some type of verbiage there by ACPE. So ACPE is asserting themselves into technician training programs. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out and how that impacts many of these technician training programs that we see at community colleges and those types of things. Certainly curriculum reform is a hot topic among academics, and Carolina has already done a tremendous changes with their program, and there's still changes coming for their program. Campbell is in the middle of discussions of curriculum reform. We're in that process right now of what is our new curriculum going to look like, what's going to change. Obviously, if you look at it globally from a national perspective, it's more clinical training, it's less heavy science-based things, and so what comes out of the curriculum, what goes in, how are things reshuffled, but all of the pharmacy schools are talking about that. And then another hot topic that's a national hot topic, not just for pharmacy students, but all students, and that is student loan debt. And we see students with hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. Part of that is the expense of graduate programs, many of them being private programs like Campbell and Wingate, but also being driven by many of the students that go to pharmacy school now have 4-year degrees, and in some cases have master's degrees before they go to pharmacy school. And so by the time they go through all of that and maybe do a residency, it's not out of the realm of possibility for a pharmacist in a clinical role doing 2 years residency to have 10 years of education under their belt. And so that adds to that. So those were the things that I thought would be the most interesting to y'all of what I gleaned while I was up in National Harbor. I also learned that it's a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. And I'll take Bowie's Creek any day.
Can I follow up on one thing that Andy mentioned, and that's the accreditation of technician training programs. I have been designated by NABP as one of their delegates to an ACP meeting in Chicago in late October, and I expect that that's a heavily discussed topic of conversation. So I'll have something to report back.
Yes. Yes.
And,
So people are at each other's
How many
throats.
seats y'all have at Campbell now?
We are at 110 right now.
110.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, and I say this just to give you a taste of what gets discussed. And I'm not by any means saying that this is where we're going, but it gets thrown around at our college and at other colleges. Does that number need to go down? Okay. As we look at the applicant pool, as we look at the quality of applicants, if we take into that then supply and demand, although North Carolina sounds like with all the reciprocity it is in good shape, nationally, I mean, is that number where we need to stay? And so those discussions are happening. That doesn't necessarily mean we're in any point of movement there, but it's certainly something that gets talked about.
Amazing. When I was on before, we were talking about expanding those numbers.
Yeah. So,
Are there fewer applicants, or are there same number of applicants, more or less, getting spread farther?
there are less applicants, unfortunately. And the spread factor does come into play, Bill, but there are less applicants as well. And, there's a lot of students too these days that they're not cultivated the way that we used to think back. Just a few years ago, it was pretty common for a student to have some experience in pharmacy. They've worked at Gene Minton's store. They've worked at Joey's store. They know somebody. We have more and more students now that are finding pharmacy that are a little more naive as it relates to actually what they're getting themselves into as it relates to being a pharmacist. And so that's a bit concerning. We used to, as an admissions committee, even strongly urge that a student really get some shadow experience at a minimum, and we're seeing less and less of that. So. Any other questions? Yes.
How does technology play into this? Did y'all discuss that?
Yes, from an educational perspective.
Well, and the role of pharmacists going forward in the future.
So I wasn't in any meetings that got into that, although there were meetings that got into technology. There was ones that I went to that were more CE oriented and that type of thing, but that is certainly a big topic.
Like artificial intelligence?
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions I can answer? This is kind of weird to be on this. No,
Won't be for long.
It won't be for long.
Thanks, Andy.
All right. Y'all have a great day. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Andy.
Mhm.
The only thing remaining on the agenda, Mr. President, is the consent agenda.
Do we have a closed session, Mr. Kennedy?
Yes, we do have a closed session. I'm sorry.
I note that there's one item on the consent agenda for Relo, and we probably should put on the record that Joey is abstaining as to that one.
I have a motion to accept the.
I move that we approve the consent agenda. And Joey abstaining.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. We do have one item for closed session.
Move to closed session.
Second.
All in favor? We're in closed session. Folks in the audience, if you will please proceed out and have lunch. Every one of you are welcome to stay. Matter of fact, you're required to stay.